Now turn to Section 1. Section 1. You will hear a woman phoning a restaurant to book a room for a party. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Good morning, Shaw's Restaurant.
Hi, I'd like to book one of your function rooms for a party, please.
Okay, fine. How many people are you expecting for the party?
Well, I'm not quite sure yet, but about 60. There are about 60 people expected, so 60 has been written in the space. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Good morning, Shaw's Restaurant.
Hi, I'd like to book one of your function rooms for a party, please.
Okay, fine. How many people are you expecting for the party?
Well, I'm not quite sure yet, but about 60.
Fine. So you will need a big room. And what day were you thinking of?
The party's for my daughter's birthday. It's her 21st. Her birthday's actually on the 17th of November, but that's a Friday, so we thought we'd have her party on the 18th as that's a Saturday. There'll be lots of her friends there as well as all the family.
And what time would you like the room for?
Oh, I'm not sure. 7:45? Not too late.
Okay.
And people will probably be leaving about 11.
Fine. We're open until 11:30.
Excellent. And what about the menu?
So, do you want a sit-down meal with waiter service?
Yes, not a buffet.
Right. Well, there are several options including different menus at various prices. So there's the standard menu, that's £25 per person.
Okay.
Or the celebration menu, which is 3 courses, it's very popular, that's £35.
Okay, I think I'd rather go with that.
And there's also our gold menu, that's a 5 course menu at £50.
No, that's definitely too expensive.
Okay.
Now, not all the guests eat meat. Will there be something for them?
Of course. We'll make sure there's a vegetarian option for each course.
Great.
And do you know if any of the guests have food allergies? Anything like shellfish, for example?
I'll need to check, but I do know that one of my daughter's friends is very allergic to strawberries. Even just being near them can be a problem.
Okay. I'll make a note to our chef to avoid those completely. Do you have any other requests for desserts?
Well, I'd like a choice if possible. And could we have cheese as well?
Of course, no problem. We can provide that.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
Now, do you have any other requests I could help with? What about after dinner entertainment? You can book a band if you'd like live music.
Actually, I think a disco would be best if you can arrange that.
No problem.
And I heard you might be able to put on a fireworks display. Is that possible?
We aren't offering that service anymore, I'm afraid. It was just too expensive.
Oh, I see.
Now, the menu package you've chosen includes a few other nice things.
Oh, like what?
We'll decorate the room for you, which creates a nice party atmosphere. We can use different colors for the balloons: silver, gold.
She loves pink, but actually, I think she'd prefer flowers to balloons. So let's go for them instead, in the same color.
No problem. Now, you mentioned that the party's for your daughter. We make birthday cakes if you'd like one.
Okay, yes, we'll definitely want a cake.
And we can put a special message on top. What would you like?
Congratulations, and then her name. That's Susie.
Fine.
Now, one or two of the guests are coming by train, but they stop running quite early, so they'll need a taxi to take them to the Forest Hotel after the party. Is that something you can sort out?
Absolutely. Anything else?
I think that's all for now.
Okay. Well, just get in touch if you think of anything else. Now, if I can just take some contact details, I just need your name and phone number.
I'm Maria Nelson, and my number's 07749 132 760.
Excellent. We look forward to seeing you soon.
That is the end of Section 1. You now have half a
Part
minute
2.
to check your answer.
You will hear a radio program in which a man called Stephen talks about an organization called extrahands.com. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Stephen Jennings has been involved with an intriguing organization called extrahands.com. I'll let him explain.
Thanks. Yes, extrahands.com was started 15 years ago by two New Zealanders who'd bought an old farm building and some land. They wanted to go organic, but they realized they'd need help clearing the fields for cultivation, and they just didn't have the money to pay for it. But they knew lots of people wanted to visit New Zealand. So they set up a website and advertised for volunteers to come and help on the farm there. Anyway, they got lots of volunteers, and they got their farm going, and extrahands.com was born. Today, the organization matches people who need help with people who are willing to work as a way of seeing the world. You can either be a host if you need assistance, or a volunteer if you're offering to work. In either case, to become a member, you just fill out a form on the extrahands.com website and pay the $25 subscription. You only have to do that once. But for your membership to stay active, every 12 months you have to go back to the website and check the details on your form there, adding information about any help you requested or work you did over that period. So how does it work? Well, if a host has some work that needs to be done, he or she goes to the extrahands.com website and posts a description of the work. So the way most volunteers access these details on the website is by specifying the country or region they're interested in working in, but a few search according to how long they want to work for. Not many people have strong feelings about what sort of work they want to do. They're mostly fairly open about it. If you're interested in volunteering for a particular job, you can email your host to arrange the dates and establish things like accommodation and hours of work. It's all fairly informal. There are no legal documents or anything like that. But you do both need to have some sort of written record of what's been agreed before you actually arrive. What about problems? Well, there are too many members for the organization to be able to investigate them all. But there's an online message board where members can post details of any difficulties they've had, things like unsatisfactory accommodation or volunteers who haven't done the work agreed, and this works very well.
Before you hear the rest of the program, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
I know you've personally had lots of extrahands.com placements, Stephen. Tell us about them.
Well, my first placement was in Portugal, where I helped a local guy with a guidebook he'd written in English. I read what he'd written and corrected the English and made some suggestions for improving it. I was very pleased with it when I finished, and I learned lots about the country. The next placement was on the other side of the world, in Australia. I was on a farm in the middle of nowhere, and since I'm pretty good in the kitchen, they had me fixing meals for 30 sheep shearers. I stayed 2 months, and it was a lot of fun, but I can tell you I was glad to get back home to California and just lie on a beach and relax. Okay, then, after a well-deserved rest, I did a job in South Korea for a small company that wanted an English speaker to show visiting Americans around. They gave me some books to read, and I learned as I worked. I loved it, and I developed a real taste for Korean food. My most difficult job was for an older lady in the USA. She had a gigantic house and grounds, but she couldn't maintain them all herself. So I worked for her, digging and planting flowers and stuff around her swimming pool. And she grew tons of vegetables, too. She was nice, but she fed me hot dogs morning, noon, and night. Now, my most recent placement was last summer in Italy. I helped a family add a room onto their house. I didn't speak Italian or know the first thing about building, but the husband had an English-Italian phrase book, and together with sign language showed me exactly what to do. And the wife's cooking was out of this world.
Thanks, Stephen. And if you want more information about...
That is the end of Part 2. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to Part 2.
Now turn to Section 3. Section 3. You will hear a tutor called Dr. Harris and a student called Lisa discussing Lisa's postgraduate research project on the role of health visitors. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Hi, Lisa. Good to see you again, especially since you've chosen to do your master's with us.
Well, I enjoyed my first degree in nursing, and I decided I want to become a health visitor. You know, someone who promotes health and well-being and is part of a team within a community, getting out and meeting people of all ages. So that's why I chose this research project.
Excellent. And your focus, the role of a health visitor in the community, is spot on. But at this stage, you need to keep an open mind so you can respond to initial findings once you get underway.
From what I read, the role seems to vary quite considerably.
Yes, some health visitors tend to focus on liaising with family doctors. Others work independently with new patients. The work of health visitors in future is most likely to rely on the relationship between these roles. and I think that would be an interesting angle for you to pursue at some stage.
Yes, what I really want to impact is the problem of physical development checks, which start with babies when they are only a few days old.
Right.
Another area which I am thinking of investigating is the monitoring of nurseries, which is currently under review, and there is the issue of preschools, at what age they should take very young children. I thought I'd also include childminders, the individuals in the area of Haines that might not be qualified but look after young children.
That's an area I'd stay clear of as it's very complex.
Okay, will do. Anyway, I'd also like to make a short film about a few children.
A good idea, but it will depend on building up a relationship with one or two health visitors willing to introduce you to a family. An opportunity like that would allow you to look at how young children begin to form words, for example.
And peer relationships between children, as well as the ways in which they relate and play with each other, especially when they are around 2 to 3 years old, although early use of language is my main interest.
Okay, but there are other topic areas I'd like you to consider before we finalize the content and structure of your research. An equally important area is the child's home environment and the effect of a newborn baby.
Right.
You need to consider the impact of this on the parents, particularly if the family lives in poor economic circumstances. Of course, the additional expense could be a worry, especially if there are other children. Certainly, all those matters are very sensitive and not necessarily easy to detect. There's plenty of help available, but many people often feel too proud to ask for it.
This is the area where I will need to be familiar with family law, isn't it?
Very much so. By all means, be aware of the medical conditions, and you also need to consider social practice. But you'll find that in most circumstances, you will have to refer to the law to understand how far a health visitor can intervene.
Yes, I appreciate that.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
Now, your book list. I'm glad to see worldwide health care policies tops your list.
Well, I wasn't sure how relevant it would be, but it's a new edition, so the information is current.
Yes, some of it may not be relevant, but it's important to keep abreast of developments in other countries, which may inform our own government's legislation.
I understand. What about supporting vulnerable families? It's not as costly as some of the other books on my list.
It's an excellent buy considering the price, even though it does leave a few things out.
I've already ordered Health Visitors and Child Protection. I hope that was right.
Well, it's very expensive, but it's a sound investment, and there aren't many textbooks which cover as much detail as this. It will be a valuable reference even if the style is occasionally boring.
And what about the future of health visiting? I'm unsure how useful it will be.
Useful in a utilitarian sense? Probably not, but it's stimulating in the way the writer considers what health visiting could be like in a perfect world. I'd suggest dipping into it to discover the improvements which could be made if money were no object.
And resources for health visitors?
Strangely enough, it's not as helpful as the title suggested. It offers a huge variety of activities and strategies which are great when working with young children, but they're presented in a rather haphazard way, and the index isn't much use either. Be very careful when using it.
Okay.
That is the end of Section 3. You now have half a minute to
Part
check
4.
your answers.
You will hear part of a talk about recent research into the design of workplaces. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Hello everyone. I recently completed some important research into the way office space is designed and its impact on employees. The open plan office had been the norm for offices around the world. I'm sure you can picture one. A big room with maybe 50 or 100 workers sitting at their workstations. You might think open plan designs are a recent phenomenon, but they actually came about in the early 20th century, when businesses needed large numbers of people to do typing. These employees, usually women, used to have to sit in rows working away at their typewriters under the watchful eye of their supervisor. Over the years, designers have come up with several variations on the open theme. In particular, this has been achieved through furnishings. The early designs featured separate desks. A subsequent design introduced the concept of the cubicle. These can have either high screens that workers can't see over, or a screen just low enough to keep a lookout for the manager. And nowadays, with the increase in large call centres, a phenomenon known as hot desking is common. In this system, employees working on different shifts are asked to share the same workstation. As you can imagine, this is not very popular with staff as there is little opportunity to personalise your workspace. In fact, my research shows that employees in general dislike the open plan design. As a part of my research, I conducted a survey of the staff in several large companies with open plan offices. The employees all voiced similar concerns about the design. Firstly, they felt that the open plan took away their privacy, but many also felt the need to carry their valuables with them at all times. So, to some extent, they also felt there was less security with these designs. Another common complaint may be something for employers to consider when choosing this type of design, and this was that these types of office space are bad for the health. I was intrigued by this possibility, but looking at staff records, it does seem to be borne out. So, if this design is so unpopular, why is it so commonplace? Well, the answer to that is in the benefits that the employers feel this type of design has. Of course, there is the obvious benefit that this design significantly reduces costs, both in terms of rent and even in terms of energy use. Employers also argue that an open plan design leads to better teamwork and communication. They also feel that new staff can learn from observing other workers, so this design can actually help in training staff. However, the complaints voiced by employees seem to suggest that the disadvantages far outweigh the advantages. The reality is that unhappy workers are unlikely to work well together, and there is plenty of evidence to suggest workers are frequently distracted from their work by the noise that is all around them. What is clear is that as designers, we need to think carefully about the impact that our design has both on the staff involved and the work that they do.
That is the end of part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to part 4.